A very good morning to you. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Our top stories today. Israel's military says it will investigate how its soldiers mistakenly killed 3 hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. A post-mortem finds Friends actor Matthew Perry died by accident due to the effects of the sedative ketamine. And Donald Trump's ex-lawyer has been ordered to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in damages to 2 former election workers. But let's take a look at the stories making the front pages of the papers for you. A great day for the truth. The Guardian leads with Prince Harry's victory in the High Court over his phone hacking claims against Mirror Group newspapers. The discovery of a body in the hunt for missing mother Gaynor Lord is top story for the Express. The Telegraph reports that London Mayor Sadiq Khan has blocked a plan to send cars to Ukraine that would otherwise be scrapped for failing to comply with ULEZ standards. The Times has been looking at GP waiting times and reports that millions more people are now waiting over a month to see a doctor. The Sun speaks to the grandmother of Alex Batty, the British boy found in France after being missing for 6 years. And the Financial Times says Western nations may seize Russian central bank assets to help fund Ukraine's war efforts. And the Eye has seen data suggesting that more than 1 in 5 fixed-rate mortgage deals are due to come to an end next year and are expected to leave their 1.5 million holders financially worse off, I'm afraid. And half-price Christmas, that's the front page of the Daily Mail, which says major stores are already holding big sales to try and shift unsold stock before Christmas. The Daily Mirror reports that the BBC is axing the quiz show A Question of Sport. That's after 53 years. And The Star is outraged that some people think potatoes should lose their status as vegetables because apparently they're not healthy enough. Now that's breaking news if you've ever heard it before. We're here now with journalist and author Janelle Aldridge and Conservative commentator, columnist Samantha Smith. Clearly a potato is a vegetable. You know, come on, let's put it out there. But look, we will discuss the top stories here. We'll start with the Eye because, you know, millions of people that signed up to those low-rate deals, you know, back in 2020, I was one of them, they are expected to face misery when those deals shortly come to an end, Janelle.
Yeah, my deal came to an end in August, and it was a 2-year deal, came to an end, and all of a sudden I was faced with the prospect of either paying double the amount if I didn't go back onto a fixed, or just 50% more, which is what I'm at now, which is still quite a hike, and to fix it for another 2 years. So millions of Britons who are coming to the end, it is a really tough because, you know, depending on your income status, for some houses that are a single income household or even in 2-income household, your pay is not often rising at the same rate that your mortgage will be rising by. And what are people expected to do in those times? Now, some variable rates are hitting 10%. I mean, that is absolutely massive. And although the bank held mortgage rates, I think it was at 5.25 in this past week, that's still a massive amount of interest. It's nowhere near. So what some people are saying that what they're thinking is that we've reached the peak. Now that we're holding, that there is potentially that some base rates could go below 4% soon, which would be great news if you've got a fixed deal. And in the past week, some deals have been at 4.29%. I think that was HSBC, Nationwide, TSB and Virgin Money. And they're offering those deals at 4.29%, which is great news for people. But it's just a reminder, you know, we were talking in the last segment about half-price shopping and Christmas. You know, your money can only stretch so far.
Yeah.
When things rise, it just leaves you with less and less in your pocket. And so, you know, I'm hoping that there is some light at the end of the tunnel next year and that things go down. And I took in the end the view that if I take this fixed deal, it wasn't too much to cut it if the interest rates go down by a lot. But it's
Clever girl.
You're making big financial decisions.
Well, this is it. And there's the other argument, isn't there, that actually the end of cheap money and cheap borrowing, we won't go back to those times, and that's a reality for lots of people, including those renting, Samantha.
Absolutely. We're seeing this across the housing market. I myself, I don't have a mortgage, and I don't reckon I'll have any prospect of getting a mortgage in the next 10, 15 years with the way the housing market is. But what we're seeing across the board is real-time wages rising, as Janelle said, not at a rate that is similar to or anywhere near the rate that rent or mortgage prices are raising. And although the government is hoping that inflation will fall in the coming year or 18 months, realistically it's not falling fast enough to protect Britons from feeling the squeeze of the recent rises in whether it's rent or the general cost of living. And so people are going to feel the crush, and I doubt that it's going to go away anytime soon.
No, and then on top of that, we will speak about energy bills a bit later, but those are increasing too. So there isn't much light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the cost of living crisis that we're all feeling. We will move on though, and we will touch on the Israel-Gaza war. We heard that 3 hostages were killed by mistake by the IDF. They're investigating. But in The Guardian, they're focusing on the humanitarian aid and perhaps news that more aid finally will reach that Rafah border crossing and go through to the people that need it.
Yes, prior to the ceasefire, it was estimated that around 50 aid trucks were entering per day. This is now up to around 100, although the levels entering Gaza and entering are still not high enough to be able to meet the basic standard of living that's needed for Palestinians. We saw several weeks ago the containers being broken into by people who were not, looting or seeking to cause civil unrest, but people who are desperate for their basic necessities, who are living in a time of war and who are not having their basic needs met. And I think that now more than ever would be a time for the UN or another humanitarian body to step in and to remind both sides, although it's more difficult with Hamas, of their humanitarian obligations. And I think it's very significant that the US has intervened. President Biden has said that that Israel obviously need to continue going after Hamas, but the need to protect civilian lives is also important, and that it serves as a very important reminder from one of Israel's biggest allies that they need to keep in mind their obligations to innocent Palestinians and Israelis indeed.
And then meanwhile, as we've seen protests from families who have people being held hostage by Hamas, protesting, unhappy with the Netanyahu government, and that's going to be a continued problem.
It's going to be a continued problem, but I do think the US intervention is probably the thing that will now make the biggest amount of change. Yeah. The fact that the US are now kind of saying, okay, look, we're backing you. However, we need you to change course. We need you to change the strategy. And I do think that's going to be the biggest, because with the US backing them, I think there's always kind of been that sense of, well, they're not that they're doing the right thing, but that they have that comfort, that they have that backing, they have that veto. Should that change in any way, shape or form, then that I think will cause them to have to shift tact. But yeah, I think humanitarian aid is well needed, and I think it needs to get there. And I do think the international community needs to make sure that we are making sure that civilians are getting their basic level of living needs met. That's important.
Okay, closer to home then, ladies. I received an energy bill a few days ago and I thought I was seeing double because prices are going up. The Sun noting that cash-strapped Brits face extra charges, which is a big worry, isn't it? Because we all thought that was perhaps behind us. It isn't. It's going to get worse.
No, it's not behind us. And Ofgem is saying that all households basically need to cover the debt of people not being able to afford to pay. So by virtue of not being able to afford to pay, now you've got something extra to pay because everyone couldn't afford it. I think we're getting into the stage where I think we need to look at Ofgem and its role and how they are looking at these things, because actually is there enough distance between them, the energy companies and also the government, because essentially Ofgem is still run by the government. So I do think that we need to have a look at that, because for a long time, with things just going up and up and up, their role is to protect consumers. And I would maybe say 8 out of 10 consumers probably don't feel protected by Ofgem and its protections. And also the fact that these are businesses and they have shareholders. And if your business loses money, that means shareholders don't lose money, but that means your business is making a loss. So the fact that this loss is then covered once again by the paying public, I think we need to have a serious look at how this is all working. Businesses should be allowed to lose money, because that's part of being in business.
Samantha, you were nodding in agreement there.
Yes, I think it seems to be some cruel form of collective punishment that the burden is once again falling on the British public when, as Janelle rightly said, energy companies have reported record profits this year. I mean, British Gas, for example, announced 969 million of profits this year. And yet it seems to be that ordinary working people are suffering due to a lack of government and regulatory intervention. So as we had to look in during the pandemic at other regulatory authorities, for example, Ofqual with the grading mishap, we absolutely need to look at Ofgem and whether their purpose is being fulfilled and whether they perhaps need to face some sort of governmental review as to their role and how well they're fulfilling it.
Okay, well, the other story covered in the Times that lots of people will have opinions on, it's GPs and trying to get an appointment. The Times are saying, actually, for some people in some parts of the country, you could potentially wait up to a month, 4 weeks for a GP appointment. I do have to say, though, if I ever call up, I think it's due to where you live. If I ever call up for my children, I will get an appointment on that day, and I'm so grateful, so blessed that that service is there. But it's still a headache for so many people in this country, Samantha.
Yes, I think the fact that we're living in the 21st century in 2023, and yet half of the country is still having to phone up their GP at 8:30 a.m. to try and grapple to get an appointment is really a sign that the primary care system in this country is broken. And the reality is that when people can't get a GP appointment, they go to A&E. And
yes,
right now we're facing increased winter pressures, obviously, but also an NHS service and frontline services that are buckling under the pressure of successive strikes and increased waiting times in general. So for the GP, which is meant to be the first line of defence, to be failing the public so massively to the extent where 14.9 million appointments took place more than 28 days after being booked this year, in the first 10 months of this year, that really speaks to the level of crisis that our frontline health services are under right now.
Yeah, it is shocking, isn't it? The Times quoting here that the private health insurer Vitality is saying that actually 40% of people are then paying for private consultations for GPs. That's not right.
So I think we have two horrible things going on: the postcode lottery, so it depends on where you live as to whether or not you can get it, and then we have another thing that it's for those who can afford it, then they get to go and see their GP. I know we heard horrible stories in lockdown about different things to do with not just the doctor, but dentists, people pulling out their teeth, and all of these kind of things that are going missing. And I think we really need to have a look at the long-term end goal of what is going to happen with this NHS. And I feel like what is going on, and I think long-term austerity, we see how this is actually, it's coming to bear fruit. And, you know, for a while when I was on here, I was talking about the strikes and the way that was dealt with and the pay rises. Again, it's down to a lack of GPs. It's not just GPs, you know, the telephone system is antiquated, but it's also the fact that there's not enough GPs. And when people see that they're not going to be paid well for the remuneration for the work they're doing, how does that incentivize people to join? So there's several problems that are all kind of coming to the surface at the same time, and I think we need the government to work on some long-term solutions, not just patching up about strikes and money this year, but something that's going to incentivize people to want to join the NHS and work for it, or else we are going to go into a 3-tier health system, and the people who are not able to pay will be at the bottom of the healthcare list, and that's not fair.
And waiting on that hotline for a GP appointment, it's painful, isn't it? That music from the GP. Samantha and Janelle, thank you so much for your time this morning. We'll still to come